So you could be forgiven for thinking that, there is something quite karmic and epic in proportion going on right now. If you're thinking, oh my God, I can't quite get over how immense and enormous everything feels at the moment, you may well have a point. And what you might be picking up on, amongst many things, this year, I mean, there's a lot of big shifts, but this is a shift that I think is bringing on a sense of destiny, legacy, agreed to karma, if you believe in karma. The nodes, I say nodes, they're plural. We've got the North Node and we've got the South Node directly opposite. The North Node is showing what we're leaning into. The South Node shows what we're releasing. And there's a story that goes with the nodes. And so in this video, it's one of my long ones, as per usual, I'm going to be talking about the movement of the nodes, the North and South, moving out of Aries and Libra respectively and into Pisces and Virgo respectively. And what that kind of shift is going to bring about in your chart according to what sign of the zodiac you are or what ascendant sign you're associating with. And also talk about some of the other things involving the nodes. So, for instance, like the idea of eclipses, the most important points in the nodal cycle of 18 months. What times do we need to look out for and what themes are going to be coming up? And again, they're going to be covered in the sign by sign forecast, which I do most of the time. If this is the first time you've come to this channel, my name is Louisa Tanner Munson. This is Feel Good Astrology. Whole idea of it is to help you feel a little bit freer, help you feel like there's a bit more clarity, so that you can make your own decisions and kind of feel like get into your joy, get into your Zen kind of place again, So all of this is offered in the spirit of helping you stay light on your toes and to feel a lot freer in yourself. I don't want to be a doom and gloomer. That's not really my game, though. I do recognize, I notice a lot of patterns, and sometimes I can take myself down those routes myself. But yeah, this is a pretty big year. And the North Node changing signs right at the start of our calendar year is a pretty big thing. If this is your first time to the channel, welcome. My name's Louisa. The whole purpose of this place is to enjoy and explore astrology in a way that helps us feel a bit freer in ourselves, help us feel like there are greater possibilities, more choice. I think astrology can be really fatalistic, and a lot of it is practiced in that way, I've noticed, where you're being done to by your planetary positions, and that's not really my game. I really want to show you how you can master the energies and feel a lot more comfortable within what's going on. If you've been here before, welcome back. And thanks for sticking with me. I've just had like 3.5 weeks off from forecasting. Needed a bit of a break, I have to say. I'm still going through quite a bit of change. You might notice my studio is changing. There's still more changes coming about. There's a lot of movement in our household at the moment, but it's all good. So anyway, let's get going. I'm going to bring up this presentation and work through it. This is all chaptered, so if you just want the forecasts, by all means go straight ahead and go for them. However, if you are really keen in understanding this 18-month cycle and understanding what it means to you at a much greater level, cherry pick, go to the bits that mean the most to you. So for instance, I recommend looking at the story of the nodes. I'll be doing a kind of very brief sort of explanation of, the North Node going through the sign of Taurus, then the last 18 months, as it's gone through Aries, and now what that might mean. I think when we look at the greater relevance of the nodal story, things start to make a bit more sense, when we're looking at humanity. I think understanding the aspects of the nodes in the next 18 months would also be helpful. So again, just cherry pick what you need to listen to be able to answer your questions. But anyway, let's bring this up right now. So before I go any further, I just want to say thank you to all the people, lovely, kind people that have supported this channel over the last year. These are all people from 2024. And right to the end, I just ran out of room, but Carly, my lover, is on the list. So thank you so much, for your historical support, and also for those of you who are still supporting me now. I really love and appreciate you. And the support can come in different ways. I do have somebody who is kithing me, which was a new word on me, so supporting me with love, which I totally appreciate as well. So anyway, so what I'm going to be looking at, this looks like quite a lot, I have to say, but I'm going to go through it as quick as I can and try and break it down as much as I can to make it make sense. But I'm going to look at what the North Node is in a nutshell, what it represents, why the polarity is important in terms of the signs and houses. We've got the cycle of the nodes. That's where I'll be talking about the story of it. Then I'm going to have a look at the Ingress chart. Now, what that means is, when does the North Node first go into Aries? One of the things with the nodes is it goes backwards. That's how it appears to go. It's not forward. It's not going from Aries to Taurus to Gemini, etc., etc. It's going backwards. So I'll be looking at that. I'll be talking a bit about the sort of like push and pull motion of the North Node and South Node. Are you leaning in or are you letting go? And what those might mean in this, across the polarity of Pisces and Virgo. I'll be also talking about Jupiter and Neptune and Mercury. Jupiter and Neptune are the co-rulers of Pisces, and Mercury is the ruler of Virgo. And so, you could say that this particular North Node at the moment has got a very sort of like Jupiter-Neptune connection, and the South Node has got a definite Mercury feel to it. So it's worth paying attention to Jupiter and Neptune in your charts, and also Mercury in your chart, and also pay attention to where they are currently. Are they touching any of your angles or your planets? That's if you know your chart. I'm sure you do. Be having a look at the Sabian symbols for 0 Aries and also 29 degrees in the sign of Pisces to get a feel from where we're moving from and moving to. The biggest aspects during the cycle, and then in part 2, looking at the actual month, not month by month, but sign by sign forecasts. So let's get cracking. So what is the North Node in a nutshell? Well, it's a calculation. That's the first thing to take on board. It's not a physical thing. It is, a point in space, and it's created. Or you can see here in the diagrams. So, this is the Earth, and obviously that's the sun, and there's the moon. Now, the zodiac, the ecliptic, is an imaginary belt right the way around our solar system. So it's right the way out here, but obviously much bigger than what we're talking about, or what I'm talking about here. But you might have like Aries, Pisces, Aquarius. Actually, off the top of my head, in this particular diagram, I don't know which way they'd be going, but they're all. There's like almost like an invisible belt made up of the constellations of stars that you can see. And obviously they've got the mythical stories around them, each of them representing a 30-degree chunk of our zodiac. So you've got, that's known as the ecliptic plane. And then there's the celestial plane, which is about the motion of the moon, and the apparent motion of the moon around Earth. Now, you'll also see there's a tilt there of 5.2 degrees. That's the angle of difference. And so it's the intersectional it's where these two planes cross. So as you can see, as this celestial plane is descending and crossing over the ecliptic plane, you've got what's known as the descending lunar node, which is also known as the South Node. And as it's ascending, going up and crossing over the ecliptic plane, you've got the ascending lunar node known as the North Node. So you've got those here. So the North and South Node are known as being in opposite directions when we're looking at it from our birth chart perspective. Like I say, it's about the intersection of those two planes. The The North Node, you might hear about it being called Rahu, and the South Node as Ketu. That's in Vedic astrology. So if you hear of those, that's what they're referring to. But they are always best understood together, because the celestial, everything celestial is really bringing up the imaginary, the more yin-based energy, the intuition, our psychic abilities. And then this ecliptic plane is all about the sun and the zodiac, and that's really bringing in our embodiment, the very physical energies. It's very much like the yin yang. It's very much like the masculine feminine energy, or up down, in out, and shake it all about. So astro.com is a really good place to search for quite easy to understand definitions. I mean, if you put in a search for the ascending or descending nodes right now, you're more likely to get something astronomical explaining it. If you put in the North Node in Pisces, you're just going to get some kind of there's loads and loads of articles out there at the moment. Everyone's blogging about it at the moment. But understanding how it's created, I think, is quite interesting. So what do the nodes represent? So the North Node, and I took this straight off of astro.com. Again, they've got a search function. I really do recommend it. So the ascending node stands for the future or direction in which the personal situation should develop. This direction may be similar to the rest of the chart, or it may suggest new and unfamiliar territory. It's also got a resonance with Jupiter and the Sun. So, Jupiter and the Sun, first of all, are seen as they're seen in kind of a positive light. They're seen as being good or jubilant and sort of helping you. There's the idea of fortune and success with the Sun and also Jupiter. So the North Node is really showing us the direction within our charts that we want to be heading in to receive the most amount of benefit, to be raised up. And I also think the North Node shows us what we're being challenged to achieve. It's, I think, describing our legacy in many respects, because, for some of us, we fight it. There might be lots of signs around us kind of really showing us what life is wanting us to do, and how, and also talking about what our soul is crying out for, because there is something very soul-like, the celestial plane, and then something very grounded with the ecliptic plane. This is, I think, really helping us to bring our soul's mission to life, bringing it to earth. And so the North Node, I think, when you see it in your birth chart, and you can interpret it in your birth chart, I think that gives you a real clue as to what your mission might be here on Earth. Also, if your North Node is in a conjunction with another planet, that might also give you a tighter sort of definition as to what you might be working on in this lifetime, and maybe what you might need to do for a living. For instance, in my birth chart, my tightest aspect is actually between the North Node and Neptune. They're in such a tight conjunction. And the North Node and Neptune in their conjunction really does describe how I tend to work. The Neptune themes are very much about intuition, psychic ability, and working in unseen worlds. So there's a lot of that going on. Now, conversely, the South Node, known as the descending node. Again, I got this from astro.com, so thank you to them. This is associated with the past. So you've got like the future and the past. So when you see them in your birth chart, they're really describing your timeline, if you want to use like the past and future kind of description. Now, whether it's in the karmic sense or things brought over from past lives into the present one, or in the sense of the influence of the past in your current life, such as inherited traits, the South Node may also show an area of life where the person is proficient, where it's really easy, but yet where little further growth will occur, i.e. you're in your comfort zone. So, and you'll also see that whereas, the North Node is associated with Jupiter and the Sun, the South Node has an association with Saturn. So Jupiter is our is our benefic, our beneficial planet, and Saturn is known as a malefic. It's seen as being quite negative, or can be. So yeah, the South Node, I think, shows where we might be resting on our laurels, where we, like, something is a doddle, we don't need to put any effort in, we know how to handle the energies. And so the South Node, I think, can show us where we might be a bit lazy and flabby in life, like where we're kind of just winging it. We're not really paying too close attention. We're not challenging ourselves. We're literally sitting in the delight of what is really easy for us. And of course, there are some real dangers with doing that, because when you do that, your life really doesn't grow. Very much like what is shared here, little further growth will occur. So it's always an interesting point. And of course, if you've got conjunctions with either the North or South Node, that's going to further describe, how you're using those energies. But if you've got something in a trine to one, it will be in a sextile with the other, so you might want to sort of analyze how the planets are lined up, because if one of your planets or angles is aligned to one, it will by default be aligned to the other. In particular, there is a phenomenon known as a skipped step. I will talk about this in a different episode or video. I've got a few skipped steps. They are, that is when they're exactly in a square to your North and South Node, and they can really be a bit of a bugbear, in life. I noticed that people born in 1965 in particular have got a very difficult set, because then their North and South Node are square to a conjunction between Pluto and Uranus on one side, and Saturn and Chiron on the other. So there's a lot of really big karmic patterns going on for them. So it's worth checking this out. The nodes, even though they're not real, they're not physical, they are very sensitive points, and they are absolutely bringing out a lot of change. So like I said, we're always looking at them in pairs. And so this is actually the North Node cycle. And this is where I've taken this from astro-seek.com. They're the two sites I use the most, astro.com and astro-seek.com. So this is the North Node cycle. You can see it's 18 and a half years. And each of these signs, so like currently we are just at the tail end of the North Node in the sign of Aries. It's been there for 18 months roughly, give or take a few days, and then it's going into Pisces for about 18 months, and so on and so forth. You'll see it's really, really even. Sometimes with planetary cycles, you'll see there's really big like areas in some signs, and it's tiny in others during the cycle. So this is a real sort of even cycle to observe. Now, when the North Node was in the sign of Aries, these are all the opposite signs. In Aries, the South Node was in Libra. Before that, the North Node was in Taurus, and the South Node was in Scorpio, and so on and so forth. So this time round, we can see our North Node is in the sign of Pisces, ergo, therefore, Ergo and Virgo, sorry, didn't mean to rhyme there, but the North Node is in Pisces, the South Node will be in Virgo. Now, you can also use this to work out the houses as well. In a birth chart, we've got these 12 sections, and each of these sections, so this section here, whether you've got Aries here or not, that depends on your birth chart, but the first section is known as the first house, and exactly opposite is where the seventh house is. Then we've got the second and eighth, the third and the ninth, the fourth and the 10th, and so on and so forth. So if I know that my North Node, well, it varies according to charting systems, but for instance, in an equal house charting birth chart, I've got my North Node in the second house and my South Node in the eighth house. So, like right now, as this North Node has gone to the sign of Pisces, the North Node and the idea of learning and the sort of challenge, what are we leaning into? It no longer has an Aries definition. It's now having a Pisces definition, which I'll sort of explain in a second. And the South Node will take on a Virgo disposition after having been in the sign of Libra. So it's always important to look at what you're releasing and what you're moving towards. You'll find that each of these signs really are polar opposites in the way they express themselves. So I see these polarities actually as spectrums, and maybe I'll talk about that actually in a second. So this is the midpoint where everything is equal between all tendencies. But over here, it's highly, highly rational. And then over here, it's, you could say, highly irrational or highly intuitive, and the closer you go to this midpoint, you've got the balancing of the two. So we are definitely leaning into the intuitive and moving away from rationality. That seems to be quite important. Again, the idea here is that this is a sort of karmic energy, so we are leaning into intuition for a really specific reason, and the way our world is set up seems to honor rationality above all else, above being, above being, like recognizing that we are souls in a physical body, and so, it is time, this time in our 18.5-year cycle, this is the time when we are meant to be embracing the intuitive, embracing the invisible, embracing what our soul is asking us for, more so than ever. So with the cycle of the nodes, there does appear to be a story. I've put these arrows on to show which way they appear to be going. So if this is the North Node, currently this is kind of where it is. That's where the South Node is. But it's always interesting to ask yourself, I think, when there's a repeated pattern, what were you doing the last time we were in this pattern? So let's test this. So, and I'm testing it from Aries and Libra. So the last time that the North Node went into Aries was between December 2004 and January 2006. And, Aries is very much about honoring our individuality. It's about leading. It's about being decisive, making huge decisions, facing things on our own, maybe, and relying less, like leaning away from partnership, which is obviously where the South Node in Libra is. There's been too much of a reliance on our partners, and we're sort of embracing independence a lot more. That's one of the themes. Now, it just so happens that when this last happened for me, and this is what I recommend you might choose to do yourself, is to see where that was in your birth chart. Where my Aries is and where my Pisces is around here. Funnily enough, this thing here called the cusp in my birth chart is at, I think, 29 degrees Pisces or 0 Aries. So the North Node changed signs and changed houses for me at pretty much the same point. So for me, when I was going through this North Node, the previous North Node in Aries, my relationship was breaking down. My previous relationship that I had for 11 years, it was breaking down. So, the fifth house is one of these places that rules intimacy and, like our sexual experience, the things that light us up. And of course, in the sign of Aries, to me, that was really showing that I was needing to embrace independence in my relationship, and, to kind of break away. And then up here is where I had Libra, or have Libra. And in the 11th house, it's about friendships and connections and support systems. And so I was kind of moving away from support systems and friendships and moving more into independence in myself. So yeah, my relationship broke down at that particular point. And also, I kind of disconnected from our friends that we had mutually. So I was disconnecting from all these support systems. I found myself working in a completely, it was interesting. I used to work in tourism years and years and years ago, and loved it. I was very independent at that particular time. And it was interesting that as that was changing, towards the end of this period of time, I started working in something that I'd done before, which I'll talk about in a sec. So yeah, like when it went into Pisces, straight after this breakdown, I moved home and I moved to work in a tourism place. I'd worked in tourism for years before. And so, the North Node here went into my 4th house, which is all about my home and changes at home. And the South Node was in the 10th house, which is all about your career. So I moved out of training and for a brief period of time, funnily enough, for about 18 months or so, I moved back into a career that I'd enjoyed, that created a space for me to be myself. And of course, it created change for me at home. So it was interesting to observe, there were changes for me in terms of how I was living. So, we're now a whole cycle on, and, in this more recent time, my relationship is a lot more stable, but I have been becoming more independent in how I work. And, there's been a lot more about friendships that have come up over the last 18-month period. And I am quite sure we're going to be moving, and lots of stuff is going on with my career. So again, those themes are already cropping up for me. So again, I would absolutely recommend that you have a look at your own birth chart, identify where Aries and Libra are, and also where Pisces and Virgo are, and see what that might mean for you. So let's have a look at the Ingress chart. So this is the exact moment. Now, again, one thing I haven't mentioned is you've got the true node and the mean node. So the true node has a bit of a wobble, because actually the true node is always kind of going forwards and backwards. So it's always moving. It's always moving in this trajectory, but it goes like this, kind of feathering its way through the zodiac, just ever so slightly. And lots of people just use a mean node, which is the sort of exact sort of average point of the node. But I think this is the true node. So the moment the true node crosses over to 29 degrees 59 into the sign of Pisces. So this is the moment that happens. I've set this chart up for London because that's the midpoint, in terms of time zones, and it's also the time zone that I live in. So the first thing that I notice about this chart is that the moon is in the sign of Gemini, which is ruled by Mercury. It's one of those Mercury signs. And the sun is in the sign of Capricorn, which is ruled by Saturn. And if you remember, I said that Mercury is the ruler of Virgo. So there's a definite Mercury feel in terms of these nodal shifts. And also the South Node has an association with Saturn. So it's interesting that at the time of this North Node moving into Pisces, there's a really strong kind of South Node energy with it, given that the sun and the moon are both in Mercury and Saturn signs. That's kind of interesting to me, So, like obviously Saturn is showing us our hard-won lessons. And Saturn, I think, sometimes kicks us up the butt as well. So, Saturn is quite important, I would say. Now, Saturn is currently in this kind of square phase with Jupiter. If you wanted to know more about that, I recorded a Jupiter square Saturn show midsummer of last year. They go into a square every 9 years. And this particular square, it's normally done fairly fast, but this Both of them have gone forwards and then retrograde and then coming back. And, so they are going to make their final square, I think on the 27th of April. No, 15th of June. It's in June next year. Can't remember the exact date off the top of my head, but, there is a slight sort of tension between Jupiter and Saturn at the moment, like between moving forwards or backwards. And of course, the North Node here and the South Node here, Saturn is ruling this one, and the North Node and Jupiter, like it's sort of like they're, so they're kind of working at cross purposes. So it does feel, I think, the North Node in Pisces will start to get easier when Saturn and Jupiter come out of their square. I've actually popped that there, but it's really bringing up the sort of tension between moving forwards and staying in the traditional and the hard won patterns, the rigidity or flexibility, which way are we going to go? And so it still feels like there's, quite a lot of uncertainty for people. The next thing that I notice is that, the North Node is in a fairly tight conjunction with Neptune, like straight away. In fact, the North Node has been in a conjunction with Neptune for quite a while, and they're sort of getting closer and closer and closer. I'm born with that particular conjunction. If you remember me saying earlier, Neptune and the North Node are really tight in my chart. So I know that it brings up a lot of mysticism, a really strong energy of faith, belief, a dreaminess and imagination, which obviously both of those, they can be read positively and negatively. It can bring up real sort of horror-like scenarios in your mind if you're not able to stay positive. Neptune and the North Node could almost bring out your worst imagined nightmares. You could absolutely catastrophize things for yourself. But at its most beautiful expression, I think the North Node and Neptune will be enhancing your spiritual ability. Your feelings of empathy and desire for forgiveness is going to be off the scale. What I'm noticing, and this is obviously because of my own viewing, when I'm on YouTube, that there's a lot of stuff coming up. And obviously I'm in my own echo chamber, but right now my echo chamber is really talking about out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences. I've had such a strong out-of-body experience. It actually felt like a near-death experience. But like this kind of otherworldliness, that where are we right now? Are we about to cross over into a new threshold, into a new reality? So to me, it feels very much like nothing is certain right now. And we feel like we're poised in between two different worlds. And I think as well, this is actually quite magical. We can start to use this to divine our future and also to feel our future and to kind of feel it into being. I would absolutely recommend that we do that. Now, Neptune is trine Mars. So the North Node is also trine Mars. Now, Mars is retrograde until I think the 27th of April. No, it's not till the 24th of February. There we go. So Mars is retrograde for quite a while at the moment. But, Mars is in a trine to the North Node. So first of all, the North Node is saying, how we might be most able to bring our legacy forwards and most kind of work with what we're meant to be working with. And in the trine to the North, in the trine to Mars retrograde, I think that's saying, we need to be taking action at a personal level, taking sort of really strong action about how we are internally in terms of our physical fitness. It's not, like Mars is that kind of pumped up kind of energy that we have, that really pumped up motivation. And, Mars retrograde, I have to say it's hit me pretty hard. I've got Scorpio rising. I mean, if you've got, I'd love to hear from you guys with Scorpio rising or Aries rising. Has this retrograde knocked you for six? I think the key message here is not for us to push ourselves. Right now, and with this particular like North Node going through Pisces, I don't think we're meant to be pushing ourselves in the physical so much. I think we're meant to be restoring ourselves slowly but surely. I do think it will get easier once Mars goes direct again. But, this is the Ingress chart. This is really giving us a snapshot of everything we need to know to get through this North Node in Pisces cycle. So gentleness with ourselves, not turning on ourselves because we're not going to the gym every, like morning, noon and night. We probably aren't going to be feeling as determined as usual. We might not be feeling as physical as usual, but that's not to stop us from taking action and being consistent and possibly being a bit more fearless, because like Mars does bring up a sense of fearlessness and courage. So we might need to take courage internally. So, how can you internalize courage? And how can you restore yourself slowly, gently, and gracefully? So they're my sort of thoughts there. The sun is in a trine to Uranus, and to me that's an indication that there's a lot of new things that are going to be coming up in this particular North Node cycle, where we are being a lot more innovative, a lot more inventive. Possibly we're expressing ourselves more with the modern tools than usual. I say that with some reticence because, I tend to be a bit of an old fart. I really do think we're missing out on a lot of things, by being on our computers all the time, using all these fantastic tools and stuff. And yet, isn't that what's also it's helping to raise the vibration of humanity right now? Because, by using this technology, we're able to, in a physical way, reach out. I say physical, it's obviously through the internet, which isn't physical, but it appears that like you and I are connecting right now. I'm looking at you right now, so I'm able to talk more using these tools. You're most likely able to reach out more with these tools. So maybe this is, how can we blend these tools with our actual real life, and how can we use the tools to make our life easier without losing focus of who we are and expressing ourselves. The sun is about us expressing ourselves. These are both in the sign of, in earth signs. So this is like, how can we ground the ingenuity, and how can we be grounded and spontaneous at the same time? I think that's quite an opportunity. Now, Venus and Saturn are in a conjunction. It's an applying conjunction. Venus is moving towards Saturn. So that's also another one of the themes. Excuse me. That's another one of the themes for this particular North Node in Pisces, I would say. They're also both in Pisces. But, Venus is all about flow and connection and how we relate to other people. And Saturn, I think, is where we're formalizing that. And Saturn, he does have a bad reputation. But Saturn also helps us get stable and create bases and foundations. And so I see that Venus and Saturn coming together in a conjunction is a bit like a handshake. It's connecting people, possibly with purpose, possibly with spiritual purpose. So I think there's going to be a lot of agreements between people, and understanding between people. We are going to want to relate to people more, I think, more respectfully. And I think we're going to want to be of practical assistance to each other, so it's not like, we're not, and I'm guilty of this too, people might put a distress call out on Facebook or on social media, and then you get all these people saying, "You okay, hun?" kind of thing. I think we're going to go beyond that. I'm not suggesting that there's nothing wrong, there's nothing wrong with saying, are you okay? And reaching out. But I think we're going to be reaching out and trying to reach out in a more practical way, and find ways to feel a lot more connected to each other. Even if we're not able to get into the same room, how can we take practical action to assist each other? And maybe, how can we take practical action to be more forgiving, and more compassionate with each other? I see those as a strong possibility. And I've already mentioned that Saturn square Jupiter energy as well. So the story of leaning in and letting go then, let's talk a bit about that. So we're leaning into the North Node. That's why I've put the cross there, the check mark. We call that a tick in England. Although ticks sound horrible when you're picking them off your dogs or cats. Ooh. So leading into the North Node. So North Node's going into Pisces. So it's talking about our future direction. It's also talking about our challenge to be ourselves and our challenge to move forwards. But Pisces isn't a very direct sign, so I'm reading this that the future direction is unclear. It's not clear. It's not set out straight. When I think it's unclear, that means there's lots of possibilities, so, most of us, I think, are usually thinking, okay, I'm going to do this, then I'm going to do this, then I'm going to do this. Like we've got this linear timeline of how we're moving forwards. And again, I do that. And yet I don't think things are going to be clearly laid out like that. I think, we might have these almost 3-dimensional timelines, or 5-dimensional timelines where we've got things that are coming in and we don't know exactly when they're going to land, but we're going to be a lot more fluid and intuitive and creative about how we're moving forwards, about what our future direction is encompassing. I described it recently with somebody as it feels like there's a puzzle, and I've got loads of pieces and I'm putting the pieces together, and the moment I get these pieces together, they start popping out and moving around. And then I noticed that the picture on the pieces is also changing. It's a bit like we're trying to navigate our way through jelly. It's like, they're kind of wobbling. They're not making a tight fit. Nothing is that clear. It's all kind of a bit wobbly. The sign of Pisces, I haven't mentioned this yet, but, I have mentioned the zodiac. So, it starts in the sign of Aries. It starts at 0 Aries, and it builds a story. It goes into Taurus, into Gemini, into Cancer. And I think, there's a definite story of the zodiac. And it's like the story of man, and man's development, like we're born, we're birthed. And it's about our survival. We're very much in our physical body. And then we're starting to relate and notice that we've got tools and resources around us. Then we're noticing how to be social. Maybe in that 2nd or 3rd year, we're starting to talk more and connect and have recognizable friends. Then we're really noticing where our home is and where we're safe. And, it goes round, and in the sign of Capricorn, we're really sort of embracing the idea of our prowess and our status and what we've achieved in life. And then I really think the sign of, if you look at this as a timeline of growing older, we kind of reach a pinnacle, maybe where we've been thrusting our way through life, to get to the top and to earn the most amount of money. And then, often what happens, it's not definite, but for most of us, we get to a stage where maybe we've earned as much as we can, and that maybe it's not so much about earning anymore, but more about experiencing and gifting and helping. And so, as we're coming around to this part of the chart, like the 11th sign of the zodiac, Aquarius, there's more of a philanthropic, friendship-based thing, where we might want to just connect with people and work with people. And then as we're coming into the sign of Pisces, I see it as very much a dissolution, like we're dissolving, everything that we know to be true it's kind of dissolving away, a bit like how our bodies tend to dissolve away. And, for those of us who, have had relatives that are slowly kind of losing their consciousness in a different way, like their personalities are sort of seemingly dissolving. If you've seen anyone with Alzheimer's or dementia, their grip on reality is easing off. And some might say, well, good for you, because reality sucks sometimes. But it's very hard, if you love someone, to see them almost dissolving before your very eyes. And so, like I've been around people who, I don't necessarily see dementia as being a 100% bad thing necessarily, because I have been around people who appear to go into their own world, but actually appear to be quite happy in their own world, which is also quite nice as well. So and again, sorry if you are going through this. I have put at the bottom, I'm no guru, but this whole North Node in Pisces brings out multiple points of view. There isn't anything right or wrong. There is no good or bad with Pisces necessarily. It's all something to be experienced. But one thing I noticed as a mum is, when my three were first born, it felt like they were still in the mystery. And, they would nod off, I give them milk, they'd nod off in my arms. And then sometimes when they woke up, they'd be quite startled and they'd look around and kind of almost look disappointed. And I felt like they were still connected to where they were before. I really felt like the overlap, almost like they were transitioning into their bodies. Obviously they were physically alive, but I feel like their consciousness was here and somewhere else where they were. I really felt that shift. And roughly around about 2 to 3 months of them being here with all three of my children, there was a point in time where I said to my husband, they're definitely with us now. They are fully here. They're really fully in their bodies. And I've noticed, when I've seen people coming up, nearing death, that they aren't in their full consciousness all the time. They tend to wander, almost as if they are already going into another world, or there are parts of them. So I really do think, this area here is like the beginning of a new journey and the dissolution of our previous story. So I really think these are very strong themes with this particular switchover. So, the future direction is unboundaried, unscripted. It is quite emotional because it's a water sign. It's about beliefs and magic and mystery. We're developing a more acute consciousness and knowing awareness and flexibility. And I would say patience as well. That's not easy. If patience is something, if all this kind of fluffy stuff is something you struggle with, this could be quite a challenge. And again, I would refer you back to what was going on in the previous time of June 2006 to December 2007. What changes were you going through? So I've also written, there is no wrong or judgment. This Pisces thing is all about acceptance. And I also think it's about faith, to not have it mapped out, faith in the unknown. I really think the North Node in Pisces is about having faith in the unknown and trusting that what is what's best. And we might not always understand why it's the best, but, life sometimes has a funny way of bringing us what we need to get through to the next stage. And so, the South Node here is letting go. This is our letting go energy, and it's letting go of the Virgo energy. So we're no longer growing in rationality, which is one of the key things with Virgo, where we've inherited a clear narrative. It's no longer assisting us. So for instance, I think I'm quite open with saying, the narrative I grew up with, that you're born, you go to playgroup, nursery school, infant school, junior school, whatever kind of schooling you have. But you go to school 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, to go to university Monday to Friday. If I recognize that's not true for most people that go to university. Then you get a job. Then you buy a house, a car. You maybe get married. You maybe have kids. There is this kind of, and then at a certain point you retire. And then you do not so much. There is this kind of consistent narrative. I don't think that narrative is currently assisting us. That sort of clarity, that sort of like life plan that most people have, that very sort of inherited, this is how it's done, it's not really right for us at the moment. We are stepping out of that. That reality is not helpful. In fact, it's kind of harming us, because it's almost like it's gaslighting us, because most of us realize that, like we have misery along the way. It's not all roses. And when you look at the amount of mental illness that goes on in the world right now, you could argue that, is that because we're adapting to something that's not naturally, inherently right for us? Have we gone too far into the rational and forgot about the actual beingness of things? So I also see this as stepping beyond the science comfort zone as well, because a lot of decisions are made based on science and facts, and any kind of indigenous knowledge is kind of forgotten. But that, the indigenous knowledge has been built up through communities, through and a sense of communion with everything around us. And of course, this is really tying into things like quantum entanglement, and like knowledge, shared knowledge, that everyone could tap into. Like the whole idea that, once, like when we look at other animals, they all appear to know what they're here to do. And they don't have anyone telling them, like sitting them down or putting them in school to tell them, this is how life is done. This is how your body works. This is what you need to eat to be able to stay healthy. Every single creature on the planet knows exactly, if it's left to its own devices, knows exactly how to live and exactly what it needs to do. And in fact, no other creature, apart from our own physical pets, no other creature needs to do things. It doesn't need to work to earn its living. It just does its living. It knows how to do it. And yet we've got this kind of like narrative that has been given to us, and this kind of scientific view of what we need to do. And I think the science and the intuitive knowingness of things have kind of like pulled us apart. So we've been pulled away from our knowing and into science, and in doing so we've forgotten where we've come from. And so I think this is one of these like 18-month cycles where we're saying, hang on, we've gone too far down this route now, and it's time to develop our knowing much more. I also think we're going to release the pursuit of physical health at the exclusion of our spiritual and mental health. So we've been on quite some drive for the last 4 years or so, in terms of our physical health. That's been high, like a high agenda, and the physical health of our planet. I'm not saying that neither of those are important, but when we're only considering things that the physical is the be all and end all, we're missing out on something else. Now, another sort of key Virgoan energy is I'm going to fix this. So we're always fixing. We're identifying problems and we go straight into fix it mode. And sometimes we're creating these fixes and patches, because everything has to be fixed. Everything has to be ordered. Everything has to be understood. And yet there's no acceptance in that. Maybe things are meant to fall apart naturally. And then in doing so, we are all generating answers together. It comes up from the collective. So, maybe we shouldn't all be trying to fix everything and tell other people. I realize I'm sharing my views here, but I'm not telling you how to live your life. This is just a serving suggestion. But, this isn't about this energy isn't about fixing. It's about having some space, recognizing that something is changing. It's evolving. It might be breaking down, and you might ask yourself why. You might ask yourself, does it need to be fixed? Is it breaking because something else is coming up? and we're coming more into acceptance. So this is not going to make sense for a lot of people. If you're highly rational, this is almost like an affront to you. And again, I refer you back to, July 2004 until December 2006. What were you doing and experiencing at that time, and how did you get through it? So that's part of that story. Jupiter and Neptune are co-rulers of the North Node for the next 18 months. So I've mentioned this earlier. You probably already know the symbol for Neptune. It looks like a trident or a lobster. And Jupiter is here. You probably know that symbol as well. He also looks, I always think Jupiter looks like a curvy four, or almost like a chair with a curvy back. It's worth having a look. Like, if you understand your birth chart, I'm sure you've already had a look, but pay extra attention to what Jupiter and Neptune are doing in your chart, and also where they are right now. So you might find, obviously Jupiter is here right now. This is the current chart, but where is 12 degrees in the sign of Gemini in your birth chart? Is it over something? Funnily enough, it's over my nodes. It's over my South node. It's also worth checking out the position of Mercury in your chart as well, because where is Mercury in your birth chart? Like Jupiter, Neptune and Mercury, I think, are more relevant because of these nodal signs, because there is such a strong kind of South node Virgo energy and such a strong North node Pisces energy. They are going to be more relevant. So anything going over Mercury, Neptune or Jupiter in your birth chart, pay attention to. And also, if you've got natal planets or angles like these, the ascendant, descendant, MC and IC, or points, like if you've got a midpoint, that's a whole other story if you know about midpoints. If you've got transiting Jupiter, Neptune or Mercury connecting with any of them, then they are also going to be more important to look at in this year ahead. So that's just something to bear in mind. Not year ahead, 18 months ahead. So let's have a look at the Sabians. So the North, and I got this from amazing Linda Hill, who, by the way, has agreed to come and record another show with me. And we're actually going to be talking about the North Node in Aries and, sorry, not the North Node in Aries. We're going to be talking about the Sabian symbols from, 0 degrees Aries to Pisces, like 29 degrees, and examine the South Node changeover as well. So we're going to watch out for that. If you're interested in the sort of new story, the new cosmic story, that's going to be great. But you can also do your own research. And I really do recommend that you go to www.sabiansymbols.com, which is Linda's website. And, you can select a star sign, select the degree, click enter, or find my Sabian symbol, find my symbol, I think it is, and it will bring it up. What you will notice is whatever symbol whatever degree you're looking for, it gets rounded up to the next number. You don't need to round it up. Just put in, like my sun is at 27 degrees 53, I think, in the sign of Sagittarius. So I would put in 27 Sagittarius, find my symbol, and it would bring up Sagittarius 28. Anyway, currently where the North Node is at 0 degrees in the sign of Aries. So it is at the start of that new story. And the Sabian symbol for this from Linda Hill's website and book is called "A Woman Has Risen Out of the Ocean. A Seal is Embracing Her." I haven't read these, by the way. I haven't pre-read these. This degree is the beginning of the zodiac, where the old gets left behind and a new understanding and awareness comes to light. Something new is emerging and it needs to be welcomed and nurtured. This is the beginning of a whole new impulse, creative and responsive. There's an emergence of a whole new potentiality. Resist looking back to outgrown and unsatisfactory conditions in your life, as they can pull you back to old and unrewarding ways of being. This is also about finding your voice and your feet. Beginnings, emergence of the feminine into concrete manifestation. Cycles beginning, the beginning of the spring or autumn. Confidence in a whole new arena of being, shedding old skins. Using the masculine drive to overshadow the emotions. Well, that's what I was just talking about, funnily enough, with the, coming out of rationality and going more into intuition. Refusing to move into a new state of being because one is held back by previous life conditions. So, that's when you're not using the energy very well, when you're stuck. That's not going to be really helping you. So the first part of this, where we are right now before the North Node changes on the 11th, is we are at this point of, we know something new is being born, and we know it's big. It's the start of a whole new cycle. So where is it leading to? Went the wrong way. A majestic rock formation resembling a face is idealized by a boy who takes it as his ideal of greatness, and as he grows up begins to look like it. Now, it's interesting because when I read that, I was thinking, we've got like the inauguration of a particular president coming up. Not necessarily, I'm not trying to judge either way. But, the whole idea of the rock formation, and maybe a boy kind of seeing a rock formation and thinking, wow, this is where I want to be. This is, I want my face in that rock. I was immediately thinking, well, you know what I'm thinking about there, don't you? But what I really get from just that description is the idea that, we might have dreams, we might have this imagination of greatness that we might want to apply in our life. And who knows, we might even begin to look like what we're wanting to create. So anyway, let's look a bit deeper, because again, I haven't actually looked at this. So this shows being able to envision or decide what you want to be, and as you grow and develop, becoming that vision. The boy lived in childhood under a hill figure of a president, and when it actually is about that, and when he grew up, he became a president himself. You may find that you are growing into the image that you have imagined, and it gives you a sense of pride, assuming you've chosen a positive image. What or who do you idolize? What is it that you'd like to become? What image would you like to project? Meditating on a goal or the projection of an ideal can lead to actuality. Just be clear about what you really desire in the situation. You might just get it. Manifestation of ideals, enduring truths, culmination of efforts. I love that. I really do get that. That if, and I'm thinking now of that old film called Field of Dreams, and the catchphrase, if you build it, they will come, about the old, what's it called, baseball field that Kevin Costner built in this film. So like if you can dream it, if you can see it, if you're building it and putting effort into something, it will come. So I really think whatever you're focusing on around the time of, in particular in this next month, because here's the thing with the North Node, it takes about a month. It moves approximately 1 degree a month, approximately. So if you were to just focus on who you are becoming over the next few weeks, I wonder where you'll be at the end of this 18-month period. That's my question to put out to you. And, I wonder what you will start in motion. Maybe you won't see the culmination of it in 18 months or 36 months, but you might well find that if you start to create where you want to be, that you just put yourself on the right path, and it will happen, maybe sooner and maybe not, but it will be putting you on a new path. So that's what I'm really getting from this. Enduring truths, culmination of efforts, image consultants, projections. I'm sure there's a lot of projections going on right now, in particular about that big hill that they're talking about. Desiring a sense of immortality, defining one's fate, conscious manifestation. And of course, a negative side to this is not being clear about who one is or can be, becoming a screen for the projection of others' ideals, falling short of the mark, shooting too far and achieving nothing. So that's interesting because, you know, on the one hand, you know, I'm saying that this is a time with the North Node in Pisces where it's unscripted, where there is no clear delineation of what we're doing and the timeline of how it's going to work out. You know, that it's kind of all in the air, and it will all the little bits will slot in almost in a divine way. And here it's also saying you need to dream it into being. That they're not, those two energies aren't working against each other. It sounds like they might be, but I don't think they are, you know. So what I really get from this is if you've got a vision and you can see it and you can kind of breathe into it, you can meditate on it, or what I prefer doing, because I'm not very much a navel gazer. I'm not very good at meditation. I work much better with guided meditation or doing meditative activities like going for a walk or washing up or taking a shower, having a bath, just relaxing in general, you know, and that's when all my best ideas come up. Or asking big questions and kind of leaving them hanging in the air. That's my favorite, is asking myself big questions. So if you can have a sort of vision of where you'd like to be, I really think the amorphousness of North Node in Pisces, I still think things are going to fall into place. I think the key here is to have faith, that what it is you're bringing about is going to happen. You just won't know the whys or wherefores. So really, this is the classic law of attraction training. You have to feel it, like really vibrationally feel it, and really vibrationally, like become that energy of who it is you are wanting to be in yourself, and then allow and trust that life is going to do what it needs to do. And it might take a while for things to fall into place. But what I've put down here is there's the time of conjunctions, the time of oppositions, and the time of conjunctions again. What I mean by this is there's a lot of energy between January and April in 2025. So we've got 7 conjunctions between the Sun, Mercury, Venus, Saturn, and Neptune with the North Node. So that's a lot of direct energy with the North Node. So if you think the North Node is about leaning in to the Pisces experience, leaning into the imagination, the intuition, the forgiveness, the laissez-faire, the let's be creative, let's dream this, let's meditate. You might not be feeling that active, but you might be feeling very active up here and up here in the heart. And in particular with Mercury and Venus going retrograde over them, you may well take some personal steps back and reflect. Venus in particular, you know, I will be doing a separate recording about Venus retrograde and how that works. But, you know, Mercury and Venus, you know, this is about how you relate to others and how you love, and also your faith in your abilities to feel well. Actually, you know, Venus is very much about wellness as well, and Mercury about how we do business, how we communicate, how we go from A to B and C to D, and so on and so forth. It's very much about movement. So between January and April, you know, there's wherever this kind of part is in your chart between Pisces and Aries, there's going to be a lot of real intense movements that are personally rocking you, like the Sun, which is about, you know, your ego expression, Mercury, the way you think, Venus, the way you feel, Saturn, how regular and organized you might feel, and Neptune, how dreamy you are. And of course, they're all going to make conjunctions to each other as well. So that's pretty intense. And during that time, there will be 2 eclipses. So yeah, this is a very important time. You know, if you're planning your year ahead already, you might want to pay some attention to the ideation of it. You know, this first part of the year between January and April is absolutely here to help us think bigger and keep creating more and more and more. The next busiest time is the time of the oppositions to the North Node, and that is when between July and October, there are more than 7 conjunctions. I didn't include the moon. Obviously, the moon is going to go over this point every month. So, January, February, March, April, it's another 4 points. And, July to October, we've got 4 oppositions. Obviously, Saturn and Neptune are still over this part of the chart. So we will have the Sun and Mercury and Venus and Mars go over this point, and also have 2 eclipses during this time. So again, this is another time. Now, the oppositions, this is where we're really being reminded of the past, reminded of where we're resting on our laurels a little bit, where we're realizing we're not really moving forwards. And so you may well find where your self-sabotage is. You may well find where you're going through those loops of just being a bit too easy about stuff. You might find a lot of people and old situations from the past come up during that time. In particular with the eclipses, where the moon is in a conjunction to the south node, you may well find that's a time to kind of cut something off and say, okay, I need to let you go now, and we move forwards in a new direction. So there is a bit of a cutting energy going on here between July and October, a kind of real sort of like letting go of stuff. And then as we come into February and March of next year, again, we've got the Sun, Mercury, Venus and Mars coming into the conjunction with that. Now, the reason that Saturn and Neptune aren't in a conjunction with that is because Saturn and Neptune are really around here. And by 2026, February to March, the North Node has moved to here. So, it's the Sun, Mercury, Venus, Mars, and of course, the Moon as well. And again, we've got our 2 eclipses. So what you'll see here is the eclipses only happen when we're in this opposition season or the conjunction season. They are our intense times. So 2 North Node cycles ago, the North Node was in the sign of Taurus, and the South Node was in the sign of Scorpio. Now, the South Node in Scorpio is quite easy. It's a Mars-based sign. It's interesting because, it's a Mars-based sign, as is Aries, and then Taurus is a Venus-based sign, as is Libra. So for the last 2 North Node cycles or nodal cycles, there has been a polarity of Venus and Mars, and then Mars and Venus. So 2 cycles ago, we were embracing the Venus energy, so embracing togetherness and inclusion at a much bigger degree than usual, and releasing selfishness, I guess, and releasing everything that seemed highly judgmental and to put people into categories. I really think 2 cycles ago, with the North Node in Taurus, there was a lot put on humans. We were going through a stage of really embracing, supporting other people, in particular, supporting people with their differences to a much bigger degree than we'd ever done before. And then I think in this last nodal shift, when the North Node is in the sign of Aries, Mars-based sign, and the South Node is in Libra, we're moving away from the partnership and like bearing in mind everybody's conditions and situations and desires and this, that, and the other, but really focusing on what we need. And so, like, to round it up, I think the last 2 cycles have been about getting to a balance point. Like, should we give our own individuality up and embrace everybody else and almost hurt ourselves in the process? And I think this is what always causes the backlash. When you do one thing and don't allow for anything else, there's always a backlash. The dialectical theory, it's like a pendulum swinging. You have a thesis here, like, this is what we're doing, and then it creates the backlash, the antithesis, the antithesis. This is what we're doing now. And then you get the synthesis in the middle. And so we're coming to this synthesis point, so we were we were going through this North Node in Taurus, where everything about equality was really, really strongly emphasized, so much so that there was this feeling that it was almost unfair, where, and that's what I think we've been going through in the last 18 months, is saying, well, hang on, if we put everybody else other than me first, I'm not going to do so well. For instance, there are lots of people out there that are environmentalists that will say, to heal the world, we need to kill all the humans, because humans are the people that are killing the world. Therefore, we'd be better off without humans. And of course, if AI was ever in charge of, decision making, that could be a logical, realization that AI, if AI is focused on must save the world, what kills the world? Oh, humans poison it, humans do this, humans do that. And AI could just come and wipe us all out, or, develop a virus to knock us all out. There's all these different permutations. So, the whole idea of creating a place that is safe and beautiful for people, in the North Node in Taurus time would have been taken so far that the next thing that humanity is learning is you can only push yourself so far, but when you're coming out of what's comfortable and what is helpful and healing to help other people ahead of yourself, it's not going to work. A bit like the adage in an airplane, if it looks like you're going to crash, you put your own mask on first before that of your child, because your child's not going to survive if you're dead, so you have to get yourself sorted first. And that is what I think this last North Node in Aries has been proven. We've been kind of coming away collectively, all of us at some level have been coming away from serving others first, and not serving ourselves. And I think there's been because obviously Aries, it's the first sign. They're not the same as the first sign in the first house, but I always think of the first house. It's very physical. It's about our body. It's about our health. So, when we're putting all our energies out to other people and to create fairness for everybody else, we can get unbalanced and we can lose our own vitality. So I think this last 18 months has been more about, hang on, what about me? How do I get myself back? And so you could argue that we've gone through a period of selfishness. And then if you look at politics, right now it appears around the world that we've gone from a very strong time of liberalism and liberal ideals and social ideals, and that there is a kind of backlash that has come in the last 18 months that has gone more on a conservative, or what some would say far right. So we've got possible far left and far right. Now, is this truly a synthesis point? Actually, I don't think this is a synthesis, this North Node going into Pisces. But, this is everyone else. This is us. This is us and everyone else. This is the collective. This is how I see it anyway. This place of transcendence, this place is unscripted, this story that, we are connecting in consciousness. I think Pisces is hands down that, if there was a sign associated with consciousness, I would put it in the camp of Pisces. It's the place where, and this is a phrase I learned from my friend Sarah from Access Consciousness sort of teachings. And I think I might get it wrong, Sarah, so write in the comments if I do. But it's like where all is welcome and nothing is judged. I really think that is the sort of energy of Pisces. Anything goes, and we're all connected. All of us, you and me, we all have a stake in this. No one has a higher ranking. We are all collectively involved. And so I think this is us humans becoming collectively motivated, not because it's the right thing to do and not because of selfish reasons, but just because we are actually connected anyway. We've forgotten that we're connected, but actually we really are. And this is sort of counter to the idea of Virgo, which is everything is fixable. It's, it's understood, it's rational, and it's like, it's all fit for purpose. This is really quite an unraveling time. So I really have come to the end of my part 1 now. I feel like I've included most of the big themes. So I hope that was helpful for you. Stick around, and I will be doing the forecast for each sign. So hopefully I'll catch up with you another time real soon. Lots of love. Mwah!